I was ready to die, but a voice from heaven called me by name. This is not just a video, it is a testimony that can save your life. You're about to dive into the most intense, raw, and transformative journey you've ever heard. Based on real testimony, this story will prove to you that no fall is too deep for God's grace. Prepare your heart, because when heaven speaks, even those who wanted to die come back to life. Liam was born on a battlefield disguised as a home. The first sound he learned to recognize was not his mother's laughter, nor the tender tone of an "I love you" whispered in the crib. It was the sound of a plate shattering against the wall. Instead of nests, there were trenches. Instead of bedtime stories, there were screams muffled by the thin walls. The house from the outside was typical of the outskirts of Los Angeles. Dry lawn, toys scattered in the yard, a lace curtain fluttering by the window. But inside, it was another story, real and transformative. Stories like this touch you, so subscribe to the channel now. You will discover that behind the worst pains, God still writes the greatest testimonies. Every room carried the smell of tension. The air seemed to freeze whenever the door closed. The prayers of Angela, her mother, were low, almost whispered, not out of reverence but out of fear of waking the sleeping beast on the couch. Darnell, her father, a man whose intelligence shone like gold buried beneath layers of mud and pain. He was called by his youth friends a caged genius, a man capable of reciting lines from Shakespeare, solving calculations in his head, and, in the next moment, threatening a neighbor with a rusty gun for a banal reason. Darnell carried in his eyes the emptiness of someone who lost his father too soon and never found himself again. Involved with Compton gangs, with his fists more than his head, he traded dreams for debts and words for volleys. He worked for UPS for a while, and for a few months, it seemed like the power would come back to that house. But when he was fired, the dam broke, and everything it held back came crashing to the surface with destructive force. First, drugs came in as a visitor. Then, they took over as owners. At first, it was just extra money selling what they called magic dust. But soon the money became poison, and the poison became a habit. Darnell was no longer selling, used. Long disappearances, short deliriums, eyes red like the brakes of a car in free fall. He no longer shouted at Angela, he roared. He didn't slam doors. He broke them down with the force of a wounded bull. Angela, in turn, was the picture of contrast. Raised under the weight of strict religion, she married pregnant, for fear of judgment. She didn't choose Darnell, she was pressured into believing she had. He prayed like someone holding a thin rope about to break. And even so, he tried to keep the home. He dressed with dignity, kept the kitchen clean, read psalms in a low voice before going to sleep. But fear was his constant pillow, and LRA, he saw everything, all the time. Hiding behind the half-open bedroom door, he memorized the sound of his father's footsteps. He knew which was anger, which was bored, which was drunk. At 4 years old, he could already distinguish a punch to the stomach from one to the face just by the sound. A muffled thud was less serious, but the dry crack, which made the breath disappear from the room, made him tremble inside. That night, the night he would never forget, Darnell arrived distraught. The eyes didn't blink. The lips murmured invisible accusations. "Do you think I don't see?" he repeated. "Do you think I'm stupid?" Angela, with her apron stained with sauce, tried to explain that nothing had happened. He tried to defend himself, but before the words came out in one piece, the slap came. A sharp sound, as if the air had been ripped in half. LRA ran. Little, terrified, went to the kitchen. He opened the drawer and, took what he could. A toy knife, phosphorescent orange with a rounded tip. He returned to the room like an innocent warrior, shaking, eyes teary. "Stop!" he shouted. For a moment, Darnell stopped. His empty eyes stared at his son. Time froze. A second of lucidity, a moment of silence, but it was only an instant. Because in the next moment, the fury exploded stronger. He attacked the child with hatred that he no longer knew where it came from. And that's when Angela, like a cornered lion, grabbed the plate from the cupboard, a white plate with red flowers, and threw it at her husband's head. The sound of the impact was dry. The plate shattered into dozens of pieces. Blood slowly ran down the side of Darnell's forehead like a signature of chaos stamped on the wall. He fell. He didn't pass out. He just lay there, breathing heavily, dazed. Have you ever experienced something that marked you forever? Just like Liam? Comment here. I have scars that no one sees. That night, as the blood still dripped from Darnell's temple and the silence weighed like lead on the room, Angela made a decision that would change their lives forever. The kitchen floor was still covered in debris, and Liam's breathing was ragged, as if his heart was trying to escape through his throat. Angela, with trembling hands, grabbed her son's arm tightly, but not brutally. It was a desperate strength from a mother who, even injured and exhausted, found a last breath of courage within herself. He ran to the bedroom, pulled a cloth bag from under the bed and stuffed the essentials inside. 2 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, and a faded photo from when Liam was a baby. Nothing else fit. Not even fear. Not even guilt. Just the urgency. Outside, a dry wind was blowing at dawn, as if even the weather knew that something definitive was happening there. Angela pulled Liam by the hand, both of them barefoot, eyes wide, looking back with every step, as if Darnell was going to rise from the shadows and pull them back to hell. But he didn't move, and they ran like 2 fugitives from a war camp. Little did they know that they were beginning the longest journey of their lives, from pain to reconstruction. The destination was uncertain, but Angela had a single point on her mental map: Aunt Regina's house in the extreme south of the city. Regina was one of those relatives that the family forgot, but who was always there when no one else was. A widow, without children, she lived in a simple house, with the smell of mothballs and freshly brewed coffee. When she opened the door and saw Angela and Liam shaking in the doorway, Regina didn't ask any questions. He just stretched out his arms and wrapped them in a hug that said it all. "You're safe now." That night, they slept on a mattress on the living room floor. For Liam, it was like sleeping on clouds. There was no screaming. There were no punches. The loudest sound was the ticking of the wall clock and the rustling of leaves outside the sea window. For the first time in years, he slept with the light off and without fear of closing his eyes. In the days that followed, Angela seemed like a different woman, still scared, but determined as ever. She walked like someone carrying the world on her shoulders, but she didn't complain. He left early to look for a job, knocking on doors, facing suspicious looks and indecent proposals, and it was in a dental office with yellow tiles and smelling of eucalyptus that he found his chance. The dentist needed someone to clean the place. The salary was minimal, but it was decent, and for Angela that was enough. She accepted right away. Liam started studying at a public school in the region. He entered quietly, sat at the back of the room, avoided making friends. He still carried in his eyes the reflections of the house where he grew up. It was as if he expected at any moment to hear heavy footsteps behind the door. Still, he tried. I copied everything from the board, read it in silence, and when I returned home, I lay down on Aunt Regina's thin mattress and tried to forget. But forgetting, as you would discover over time, is not the same as healing. After a few months, Angela and Liam were able to move into a small room at the back of a boarding house. The space was tiny. There was just a bed, a donated closet, and a small leaky sink. But there was something they had never had before: peace. They could hear the sounds of the street, horns honking, children playing, radios playing, and still sleep peacefully. They no longer needed to tiptoe around the house. They no longer needed to disguise their voices or make excuses at school. There, for the first time, Liam could leave a drawing stuck to the wall without fear of someone tearing it up in a fit of rage. It was a simple life with modest dinners, rice, eggs, and when there was change left, sausage. But for Angela, every dish placed on the table was an act of victory. She washed bathrooms, scrubbed. Tiles got 2 rides a day, but she smiled, because I knew that no matter how small it was, I had found a home. Do you also know someone who had to start over from scratch just like Angela? Comment here. Starting over hurts, but it's worth it. He was just a boy, but hell seemed to have chosen him from the cradle. After a while with his mother, instead of getting better, Liam seemed to get worse every day. While the other boys at school dreamed of being NBA players, scientists, or astronauts, Liam dreamed differently. The easy smile and sharp jokes he spread through the hallways hid an unbearable truth. The pain was buried so deep that it was already part of who he was. At the age of 7, with his mother working 2 jobs to maintain a minimum of dignity, Liam was placed in the care of Carol, a nanny recommended by an acquaintance at church. A smiling woman with a calm voice and a motherly presence, she seemed like the perfect type to take care of such a fragile child. But behind the kindness, there was a silent darkness. At first, Carol offered cookies, drawings, and long hugs, but soon the hugs started to last too long. The touches stopped being careful and became invasive. Liam didn't understand, but he felt it. The discomfort grew like a lump in his throat. He wanted to talk, but how to explain the inexplicable? How to describe the silent violation that stole your peace without leaving visible marks? I was afraid of not being believed, fear of guilt, fear of being the wrong one in the story. Then he fell silent, and in that silence guilt took root. Over time he became a master at masking pain. At 10 years old he was known as the messy kid at school. Funny, insolent, impulsive. He made his colleagues laugh, but inside he just wanted someone to really see him. He started making up stories about his father. He said he was an important drug dealer, a feared man. He lied not out of vanity, but out of necessity. If no one protected him, at least they feared him. Small thefts became routine. First bullets, then money from her mother's purse. When he was taken away by the police for the first time, he heard one officer whisper to another, "This guy already looks like a criminal." Liam listened, and worse, he believed. If the world expected him to be a problem, then maybe it would be easier to be one. Every day, the rebellion grew like a shield, but it was just a disguise for the terrified boy who was screaming for help. Nobody listened. Nobody saw. Until one night, after an intense argument with his mother, the sentence came like a punch straight to the chest. "You're acting like your father, and that's why I left you." Angela said that in the heat of the moment. I was tired, exhausted, frustrated. I didn't want to hurt, but it hurt, deeply. It was as if the ground had disappeared beneath Liam's feet. His mind stopped. The body froze. His heart raced as if trying to escape his own pain. Without thinking, he punched the kitchen table so hard that the glass top exploded into 1,000 pieces. A piece of shrapnel was embedded in his hand. Blood ran between his fingers, but he felt no physical pain, because the real pain came from within, an old, suffocated pain that had finally broken the dam. He ran into the room, slammed the door, and then everything collapsed. He cried, screamed, laughed nervously. He took the notebooks out of his backpack, kicked the wall. He was out of his mind. For the first time, I wanted to disappear from the world. He thought about dying. He thought that if he disappeared, maybe no one would notice. Maybe it would even be a relief for everyone. With his mind in turmoil, he spotted his mother's Bible on top of the dresser. He picked up the book like someone picking up a gun, but not to protect yourself, but to attack. He started tearing out the pages one by one. He crushed them, threw them on the floor, and spat on some of them. If God is real, where was he when all that happened to me? He screamed through tears. With each torn page, Liam didn't just destroy a book. He destroyed what little faith he still had left. He felt betrayed, dirty, forgotten. That night wasn't just an explosion of pain. It was an existential collapse. If at any point you saw yourself in this boy, and leave a like now. This simple gesture shows that this story is also yours, and that the pain you carry no longer needs to be silent. Liam grew up like someone crossing a minefield, blindfolded. Every step was a risk, every choice an emotional explosion. The pain of the past had stopped being a memory and had become fuel, and like all flammable fuel, it burned everything it passed. At 16, there was no more room for regrets or limits. He threw himself into chaos with the conviction of someone who believes that nothing else matters. The street was his temple, his addiction friends, his congregation. Between long drags of cigarettes, sips of cheap vodka and nameless pills, Liam tried to numb an emptiness that seemed bottomless. It was a Saturday night when everything collapsed. He had gone out with friends to a party in an abandoned warehouse, the kind of place where the music is so loud that thoughts disappear. He drank more than he should have. He smelled something he didn't even ask the name of, laughed too much. Then he cried. And, as always, he left alone, stumbling along the sidewalks like a zombie in a trance. The body asked for a bed. The soul asked for help. When he arrived home with red eyes and confused senses, he was greeted by something unusual. Silence. The kind of silence that doesn't comfort. The kind that weighs. What a complaint. That warns you that something is wrong. The front door was barely ajar, as if it had been left in a hurry. The television was still on, but there was no sound. The kitchen lights are on. The cutlery was still on the table, as if dinner had been interrupted halfway through. Liam stumbled into the bedroom, believing his mother was asleep. He took off his sneakers with difficulty and fell onto the mattress like a bag of bones. Didn't pray, didn't think. He just passed out. He slept soundly, packed with substances, like someone escaping from reality for a few hours. The dark room drowned out any trace of the real world. For a few hours he had peace, but the relentless dawn was preparing a dawn that he would never forget. The next day, he woke up with a dry mouth and a throbbing head. The metallic taste on the tongue betrayed the previous night's exaggeration. He rubbed his eyes and realized he still had half of his clothes on. He looked at the ceiling for a moment and felt his stomach drop. Something was wrong. The lights were still on. The smell of the room was not the same. A faint, sour aroma hung in the air, and there was a silence that now screamed. "Mother?" he called. Once, then another. Silence. He stood up slowly, his bare feet touching the cold floor. He walked into the hallway. "Mom, I'm hungry." He tried to smile, his voice still hoarse, as if it were just another ordinary day. But it wasn't. He didn't know, but he was already saying goodbye. Arriving at Angela's bedroom door, he pushed it open slowly, as if he were invading a sacred place. The first thing he saw was the lamp on, then the messy quilt, and then the body, static, fragile, bent over the left side of the bed, with one arm extended towards the floor, eyes half closed, mouth open, like someone trying to call for help. But help didn't come, and she, silently, left. Liam froze. For a few seconds, time ceased to exist. There was no air. The legs weakened. He fell to his knees beside the bed and held her hand. It was freezing. The fingers are stiff, a cold that had no return. "Mom," he whispered, still not accepting. "Mom, wake up. It's me." With each second, the certainty sank deeper into her chest. She wasn't sleeping. The scream came from inside like thunder, a primal scream, the kind that comes from the place where the soul cracks. "Mom, no, please don't do this to me." He shook her body hard. I cried. I begged. I tried to resurrect the impossible with desperation, but what had already been taken from him could not be given back by screaming. The upstairs neighbor heard the screams and ran downstairs. He found Liam hugging his mother's body, both stained by his tears. Angela had suffered a massive heart attack during the night, maybe due to stress, maybe because of the accumulation of everything, maybe because of the pain of seeing his son losing himself day after day. The ambulance arrived too late. The doctor followed the protocol, but one look was enough to know that she was already out of reach. As the paramedics covered the body with a white sheet, Liam felt as if it also covered the last hope he had left in his life. Sitting on the floor, his eyes swollen and his breathing ragged, he whispered her name over and over, as if repetition could bring it back, as if time had gone wrong. In the following days, the house was irreversibly empty. The lavender scent of her clothes was still in the air, but now it only hurt. The perfume, the notes on the refrigerator, the Bible marked Psalm 91. Everything seemed to mock him. Neighbors offered comfort with ready-made phrases. "She's in a better place. You have to be strong." But how can you be strong when you're the only living thing amidst the rubble? Liam went days without eating, no talking, without leaving. The mind, once noisy with pain, was now an echo, a cave. All he did was lie on her bed and stare at the ceiling, as if waiting for time to turn back or for a miracle to fall from the sky. But not even time came back, and the miracle never came. The burial was simple, few gifts, a cloudy sky. The earth being thrown onto the coffin sounded like drums of the final sentence. Liam didn't cry at that moment. The tears had already run out. He just watched, motionless, as the last handful of dirt covered what was left of the woman who, despite everything, had always loved him. There, in front of the open grave, he said nothing, but inside, he made a silent promise. He would never allow love to hurt him again. After that day, Liam didn't go back to who he was. In fact, he stopped being someone. It was like a ghost, wandering among the living. He began sleeping on acquaintances' sofas, accepting invitations that took him to increasingly darker places. He returned to drugs, with even more intensity. He drank like someone who wanted to erase the world with alcohol. I laughed with my friends, but I only thought about one thing. Why did she leave and I stayed? Have you ever lost someone and felt like the world lost its meaning too? Comment here. I already that was rock bottom, but Liam would soon discover that even the bottom has a basement. His mother's death didn't just break him, it dissolved him from within, as if all the remaining parts of her identity, her Humanity had melted with her in that room lit by a lamp that was too lit. The pain was so much that he couldn't scream anymore. It was as if the world was completely silent, except for the voice inside him saying over and over, "It's your fault." I believed in it with all my might. After all, it wasn't there. He arrived drugged, disrespected, shouted, ignored. How many times did your mother beg you to go back to being the sweet boy she knew? How many times did you hug him crying, asking him to change? And he, at the height of his youthful arrogance and accumulated revolt, just turned his back. Then, in his heart, Liam concluded, if she died alone, it was because I pushed her. Guilt became an anchor in the chest, and the only way to support that weight was to try to anesthetize him. The house, previously small but organized, smelling of lavender with dish towels embroidered by Aunt Regina, became a den. The curtains turned black with dust. The dirty dishes piled in the sink were like sculptures of neglect. Flies circled the windows. The floor was so filthy. Scattered clothes, thrown blankets, rotting food. There was no longer a mother's smell there, just rot. And Liam? He had become a resident of that lightless cave, a castaway living among the remains of the woman who tried to save him until the end. He slept where he fell, sometimes on the living room floor, sometimes curled up in his mother's bed. Other nights, he didn't even sleep. He spent hours staring at the ceiling as if he wanted to see her face appearing between the cracks in the worn paint, but all he found was the echo of silence, a sick silence, almost cruel. The routine was a spiral. I woke up looking for the next dose. He sold whatever he could, radio, clothes, pans, all for one more stone, one more bottle. Liam didn't eat. The thin body, the sunken eyes, the pale skin. Hunger only appeared when the drug ran out, and even then, it was ignored. The body trembled in the mornings without addiction, and to stifle the tremor, I ran to the same solution again. It was like trying to put out a fire with gasoline, and deep down that's exactly what he wanted, to burn until it disappears. The young man avoided the mirror. I knew what I would see there, not just a reflection of addiction, but of failure. At 18, he already felt like an old man, not because of age, but because of the wear and tear on the soul. Every time he stumbled through the corridors of the tenement where he lived, the ladies looked at him with pity. Some prayed for him in silence, others just looked away, as if his presence announced tragedy. There were days when he sat on the sidewalk, completely drunk, and talked to his own shadow. I asked the shadow if it also felt pain. He remembered his mother. He forgave himself. The shadow didn't respond. Nobody responded. And the lack of response was his only certainty. Liam didn't just believe he was like his father. He believed it was worse. Because Darnell was at least gone. But he stayed. And by staying, he destroyed everything Angela tried to preserve. The voices in his mind grew louder as the numbness wore off. They said it was rubbish. They said the world would be better without him. They said that not even God wanted him anymore. And some nights he believed this so much that he would walk around aimlessly, hoping that a car would run him over, that someone would attack him, that something, anything, would end it all quickly. But that didn't even happen. It was as if not even death wanted to come close. Once an old childhood friend found him sitting in the doorway of the church Angela attended. It was Sunday. There was a service, but Liam was there, with his face on his knee, shaking with withdrawal, completely dirty. The friend tried to talk to him. Liam only replied, "I'm just like my father, just like me." A disaster. His friend, not knowing what to say, just sat next to him. Liam was sure he was the problem. It was the virus. The pain of having become the man he promised he would never be was unbearable. Angela always said she didn't need to repeat history, that the cycle could be broken, that he was different. But now it all seemed like a lie. In his eyes, he not only repeated, he perfected the disaster. On a rainy afternoon, Liam felt sick alone at home. The heart raced, the vision blurred. I was sweating cold. He thought he was going to die. And for a brief moment, he wished it were true. He lay down on the kitchen floor and closed his eyes, ready to say goodbye. But he didn't die. He only woke up hours later, soaked with the taste of vomit in his mouth and his eyes swollen from crying. It was as if not even his body was willing to give up, as if somehow life was still holding his hand, even though he was trying to let go all the time. Days later came the dreams. Strange, vivid, almost real. Dreams with lights, with voices, with a presence he couldn't explain. In one of them, Lian saw a golden mountain, In another, a child in a basket who grew old before his eyes. In all, I felt peace. But when he woke up, this peace escaped through his fingers like smoke. Who has never thought about giving up, but remained silent so no one could notice? Have you ever felt this way? Comment a little heart below. It was night, the kind where even the wind seems to carry a lament. The city, wet with a fine drizzle, reflected the headlights of rushing cars on the sidewalks. Liam walked aimlessly, without direction, like a spectre wandering between the concrete and the shadows. He was no longer a young man. He was a body carrying the pain of the world. Earlier that day, he was humiliated by a group of boys on the corner of the main street. One of them spat near his feet and called him human trash. Another laughed and shouted that not even hell wanted him. Liam didn't react. I no longer had the strength to hate. He just lowered his head, swallowed the contempt like a familiar poison, and continued walking. When he arrived home, if it could still be called home, loneliness embraced him as usual. The smell of mold, of dry sweat, of abandonment. The mattress thrown on the floor, the windows are poorly closed. The yellow light from a streetlight invaded the room and illuminated his face. He sat in front of the window and stared into space, breathing deeply as if he was preparing to dive into a dark ocean with no return. There, without tears or screams, he spoke in a low voice, as if he were talking to destiny itself. "It's over, it can't be done anymore, I'm tired, today I'm leaving." It was different from any other time. There was no despair, no hysteria, just a strange, bitter peace, as if, in accepting death, he had finally found some kind of control. He walked to the bathroom, washed his face with cold water, put on a clean shirt, perhaps for the first time in days, and left. He didn't leave a note. He didn't even look back. He walked through the streets as if following a predefined itinerary. I knew exactly where to go. The highest bridge in the city, where the newspapers always reported fatal jumps, where no one asked questions, where the world doesn't care who disappears in the early hours of the morning. He climbed the steps slowly, feeling each step as if it were his last. From up there, the city seemed small, distant, like a board of indifferent lights. The wind was beating strong. The horns were muffled, as if the world had put on headphones so as not to hear their pain. Liam positioned himself on the railing, his body shaking, not from fear but from relief. I was ready to jump. I wanted to silence everything. The pain, the guilt, the screams from the past, the faces that still haunted him at night. He closed his eyes, opened his arms, and surrendered to the void. The impact came like thunder. The world exploded into white. For a moment, there was no ground, no sky, no body. Everything was light, loose, suspended, and then absolute silence. Liam believed that death was the end, but it wasn't, because it was precisely at the moment when everything seemed to end that something began. He couldn't tell if he was dreaming or if he was dead. But then I was in a place I didn't know, an open field. A golden light filled everything. There was no sun, but everything was shining. The air was light. The pain was gone. He walked barefoot and felt the cool grass under his feet, as if he were a child again. And then he saw it. In front of him, a figure was walking towards him. There was no clear face, but there was something familiar. Peace, presence, authority, and tenderness at the same time. The figure held out his hand, and Liam hesitantly took it. As soon as he did, a flood of memories invaded his mind. He saw Angela smiling. He saw childhood before the pain. He saw scenes he had forgotten, as if his soul was being rewound. And at the end of it all, he heard the voice, Clara, serena, but firm as time itself. "You were not created to die like this. You still have a mission." Liam fell to his knees in that field of light and cried like he had never cried in his life. The figure hugged him, and in that hug, everything he ever sought was there: forgiveness, love, acceptance. The pain was still there, but it was as if it had been put back in the right place. He was not the mistake. He was injured, and now he was being healed. The light started to get more intense. The sound of a heart monitor in the distance began to invade that ethereal setting, and little by little Liam felt the weight of his body return. The eyes got heavy. The field is gone. The figure faded into brilliance. And then he woke up. He was in a hospital, tubes in the arm. The smell of alcohol and antiseptic filled the room. A nurse was watching him. When she noticed that he had opened his eyes, she ran to get the doctor. Liam tried to speak, but his voice broke. The body hurt, every muscle, every bone, But there was something different. It was as if the heart, even though it was injured, had been replaced. The soul, even scarred, had received a new breath. For the first time in years, he felt true peace. Doctors explained that he had been found by a driver who narrowly missed running over his body on the road below the bridge. He was unconscious, with multiple fractures, but alive. "You were lucky," they said. But Liam knew it wasn't luck. It was purpose. It was mercy. Liam's body was still recovering, but his soul was already racing. It was as if the weight of years had been lifted from his shoulders and replaced with wings. He knew he couldn't go back to the way he was. The broken boy, the lost young man, the man who wanted to die. All of these no longer existed. Now there was a new name within him, redeemed. During the days in the hospital, his mind never left the golden field, from the hug, from the voice that echoed with authority and tenderness. "You still have a mission." This wasn't a dream. It was a calling. It was heaven reaching out to pull him out of the well, and Liam finally decided to respond with what he had never said before: yes. When he was discharged, he did not return to the house where the pain awaited him. He was taken in by a local church, where a lady named Martha, who had prayed for years for lost young people in the city, recognized him in a way he couldn't understand. "God showed me you in prayer," she said with teary eyes. "You are not an accident. You are a miracle." It was there in that simple temple with the smell of old wood and weathered benches that Liam heard for the first time carefully what Christ did for him. But God demonstrates his love toward us, in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Romans 5:8. The tears flowed in silence. That was his story. Jesus died for him. Even when Liam was in the trash, even when he tried to kill himself, even when he cursed his own name, even there, Jesus already loved him. That night, Liam fell to his knees, not out of despair but out of surrender. He raised his arms, closed his eyes, and said out loud, "God, if you still want me, here I am. My life is yours. I don't know how to be different, but I believe in you." And that night, the sky exploded in celebration, because the word says, "There is joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents." Luke 15:10. From then on, Liam underwent a real reconstruction, body, mind, soul. He began to devour the scriptures as if he needed air. Every verse seemed to have been written for him. Each story in the Bible seemed to reflect a piece of his journey. The rejected boy, Jose; the rebel, Jonas; the broken one, David; the lost one, the prodigal son. But most of all, he saw himself on the cross, and even more so in the resurrection. If anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. Old things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new. 2 Corinthians 5:17. Liam wasn't the same anymore. He cut ties with old friendships. He sought discipleship. He began sharing his story in recovery groups, prisons, small churches, schools. He always said firmly, "You are looking at a former suicide who now lives to give life." People were amazed at his transformation. Some scoffed, but no one could deny the sparkle in his eyes, the glow of someone who died and came back to life. Years later, Liam began studying theology, not because he wanted to be a pastor, but because he wanted to understand the one who saved him. And the more he knew the word, the more he fell in love with it. It was in John 11 that he found his definitive identity: Lazarus. Jesus arrived at the tomb and shouted, "Lazarus, come out." Liam said, "That's what he did to me. When I jumped off that bridge, I entered a tomb, but Jesus called me back. He gave me life. He gave me a mission." If you also love knowing and witnessing how much God can transform someone's life, click the subscribe button now. Let's reach as many people as possible and say that God is powerful. Today, Liam is a messenger of hope. He doesn't hide his past. He uses it as a pulpit. He tells his story in the places where he used to take drugs, in the alleys where he wished to die. Now the young man goes to these places with the Bible in one hand and the compassion of someone who knows what it is to fall and be lifted up by grace. Because the truth is this: the grace of God is not disgusted by your worst day. She goes all the way, hugs you dirty, and dresses you on purpose. And if you've come this far listening to this powerful testimony, know that this story could be yours. Maybe you too thought it was all over, but deep down you feel like you're at the end. Maybe he's trying to silence the pain like Liam tried, but today the sky is shouting your name, saying, "Son, come home. Daughter, there's still time." because it is written, "Call to me, and I will answer you, and I will tell you great and hidden things which you do not know." Jeremiah 33:3. And the greatest invitation you can accept today is this: "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11:28. Liam said yes, and hell lost a name. Today it's your turn. You thought that testimony was strong, but wait until you see what comes next. In the next video, there's something that will change what you believe, and maybe who you are. Click here on the screen and check it out.